Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Chenny Wu, here today's top stories. Today, the nation's highest court took up challenges to Biden's vaccine and testing mandates. The stakes are high in what these justices decide. If they allow Biden's mandate to stay in place, companies will face consequences in the next month. What's at stake and how is the court expected to rule? The FDA shortens the time interval for the Moderna vaccine booster to 5 months. And New York becomes the first state to make booster shots mandatory for healthcare workers. Republican Senator Ted Cruz recently called the January 6th Capitol breach a terrorist attack. This didn't sit well with other Republicans. He's gone on air to clarify his comment. The 3 men convicted of killing Ahmaud Arbery were in court today for sentencing. They were given life sentences, which is mandatory for murder in the state of Georgia. But will any of them have possibility of parole? And lastly, supply chain fraud targeting the military. 2 U.S. companies now have to pay $900,000 for allegedly tricking the Defense Department into thinking that their products were not made in China. The nation's highest court today took up challenges to Biden's vaccine and testing mandates. The justices are pressed on the question of whether to temporarily block the mandates or hold them in place. If the justices don't block the mandates, companies will face fines as early as February. NTD's Melina Weiskup followed those arguments in court today.
Justices heard challenges over 2 of Biden's vaccine and testing mandates. The first mandate applies to healthcare workers across the nation. It essentially requires healthcare providers to have their workers vaccinated or face Medicaid and Medicare funding being pulled from them. The second challenge is over Biden's vaccine or testing mandate that applies to private businesses, and this impacts over 100 million U.S. workers. And for these rulings, the stakes are high.
You know, when we put these very strict requirements on at a federal level, we're really tying the hands and having consequences downstream on the ground that's leading to massive staffing shortages, that's shutting down the economy. And I think it's very tough territory.
OSHA, the federal agency that would enforce the vaccine or testing mandate, argued to the justices that it's their responsibility to keep workers safe, so the mandate is needed.
The secretary here cited overwhelming scientific and medical evidence that the grave danger exists based on how this virus is transmitted anywhere people gather indoors together.
She also notes that it's not a vaccine mandate, since companies can opt out for a regular testing option instead. But the other side argues that it's not a matter of if companies should take steps to prevent the spread of COVID-19. It's whether a federal agency can impose those kinds of requirements.
They're trying to set a blanket-wide, economy-wide policy by an emergency rule. OSHA does not have that power.
Thank you.
The 24 states and multiple businesses in the suit argue the decision should be left up to the states.
And I think the more that there's time taken to reflect and make sure that we're doing the right thing, we'll find the right balance.
Some justices also pondered whether this mandate opens the door to letting OSHA impose other medical requirements on employees in the future. The justices mostly seemed skeptical of Biden's mandate on private businesses. It's also important to note this is just the start of an uphill battle when it comes to these mandates. Now, even if the justices do decide to block Biden's mandate, it's only a temporary block, and they'll have to take up these same arguments again in the future. Now, if the justices decide to uphold Biden's mandate, private businesses that don't comply will start seeing fines as early as February. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Today, the FDA shortened the time interval for the Moderna vaccine booster. They're now recommending that people 18 and up get the booster 5 months after the second shot instead of 6 months. Meanwhile, the Moderna CEO predicts another booster later this year. NTD's Allison Lee has the details.
The FDA argues it is necessary to shorten the time period due to the spread of Omicron. Studies have shown the variant is able to infect fully vaccinated individuals with ease. The agency said in a statement on Friday that shortening the length of time between completion of a primary series and a booster dose may help reduce waning immunity. The FDA approved the shortened interval for Moderna based on data from the Pfizer booster. In a letter to Moderna explaining the approval, the FDA listed several items it reviewed. The agency listed data from Israel's health ministry involving over 4 million Pfizer booster shots, but the agency didn't list any data involving the Moderna booster. The FDA writes, although the overall composition of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine is different than the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine, both are mRNA vaccines with safety and efficacy profiles that, though not identical, are relatively similar. Acknowledging the differences, it is reasonable to make the inference that the safety data on the 5-month interval for booster doses obtained in the population in Israel can apply to the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. Meanwhile, Moderna CEO Stefan Bancel suggests that people may need a 4th shot this fall. He said during a healthcare conference held by Goldman Sachs on Thursday that I still believe we're going to need boosters in the fall of 22 and forward. This is because the efficacy of boosters diminish over time. Bancel also said he believes elderly citizens and those with underlying health conditions may need to get a booster shot every year. So far, Israel and Chile have approved a 4th dose of the COVID vaccine. Allison Lee, NTD News.
The New York governor has announced a booster shot mandate for the state's healthcare workers. This is due to breakthrough cases of the virus. The mandate is the first of its kind in the nation. Here are the details.
What we've experienced, what we're doing.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul said Friday that due to breakthrough COVID cases and the Omicron variant, healthcare workers will be required to get a booster shot.
Because they work with our most vulnerable New Yorkers, we need to make sure that our healthcare workers are now boosted, not just vaccinated, but they have to be boosted.
Hochul says there will be no exemptions other than for medical reasons, including no test-out option. The governor still needs approval from the state's Health Planning Council, but says she expects swift approval. Hochul says the council will have a special meeting Tuesday to decide. Once approved, it will be effective immediately. Hochul says New York healthcare workers will be required to get the booster within 2 weeks of becoming eligible for the shot. During her announcement, the governor urged New Yorkers not to go to emergency rooms for COVID-19 testing or because of mild COVID symptoms.
I know you're anxious. I really understand this. But if you're an adult with very minor symptoms, you can handle a runny nose, you can handle the throats being a little bit sore, a little bit of cough. Just treat it as if you would have flu. Follow the protocols, but please don't overburden our emergency rooms. They have so much work to do.
Hochul said in the 24 hours prior to her briefing, around 5,000 people sought testing through emergency rooms across the state, emphasizing that the hospital systems cannot handle any more stress. While virus cases are rising nationwide, data shows that though more infectious, the Omicron variant is more mild than previous variants and leads to fewer hospitalizations.
A federal judge has given the FDA just over 8 months to release all of Pfizer's vaccine safety data. This is in stark contrast to the agency's original proposal to release the data at a rate that would take roughly 75 years. NTD's Grace Coulter speaks with the head of the Medical Transparency Group seeking the documents.
A federal judge on Thursday ordered the FDA to produce all of Pfizer's vaccine safety data at a rate of 55,000 pages per month. This is over 100 times faster than the 500 pages per month the FDA proposed in December. At that rate, it would have taken roughly 75 years for all the data to be released. A group called Public Health and Medical Professionals for Transparency brought the case against the FDA. Dr. Peter McCullough, who leads the group, says the judge's ruling was a win for transparency.
This case ought to establish a precedent, and the precedent should be for all manufacturers, for all administrations.
McCullough says transparency is key.
Americans have been asked to take vaccines, and they've been asked to take vaccines from actually the highest officials in the land, but they've been reluctant to do so without transparency, particularly with the record numbers of deaths and hospitalizations and permanent disabilities we've seen with this vaccine program. The only way we can get it on track is with transparency.
The FDA previously told the judge that its branch responsible for processing FOIA requests didn't have the resources to review and process the records at a faster rate. But McCullough says Pfizer's safety data simply couldn't be delayed for decades as the FDA was proposing.
You know, doctors and patients have questions now of how the vaccines, can they be administered more safely than they are right now?
McCullough says his panel is going to carefully review all of the data as it's released. He says they hope to find answers and solutions that will help prevent different kinds of vaccine adverse reactions, among other vaccine-related issues. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
Today, a judge in Albany County, New York, dropped the criminal charges against former Governor Andrew Cuomo. It was the only remaining criminal charge against Cuomo over sexual harassment allegations. Prosecutors in Albany County say they couldn't prove the case and asked the court to drop it. And lawmakers on the Hill have their own political culture. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice that each party even has a distinct rhetoric and vocabulary. Senator Ted Cruz recently said something that sounded off-key to the Republican base. Late Thursday, he tried clarifying a comment that put him on the hot seat. NTD's Miguel Moreno reports.
A day before the January 6th anniversary, Republican Senator Ted Cruz made this statement during a committee hearing.
We are approaching a solemn anniversary this week, and it is an anniversary of a violent terrorist attack on the Capitol.
Republicans on the Hill generally don't call the Capitol breach an insurrection. They criticize Democrats for using this term. It turns out that calling the breach a terrorist attack also doesn't sit well with some Republicans. Adding to the mounting backlash against Cruz, Arizona gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake said on Twitter he probably thinks concerned parents showing up at school board meetings are terrorists. Former Trump advisor Sebastian Gorka on Thursday told Newsmax that he was done with Cruz. On January 6th, the Texas senator went to Fox News, clarifying what he now calls a dumb choice of words.
So, Tucker, as a result of my sloppy phrasing, it's caused a lot of people to misunderstand what I meant. Let me tell you what I meant to say. What I was referring to are the limited number of people who engaged in violent attacks against police officers.
Senator Cruz has called the Capitol breach a terrorist attack before, multiple times. Cruz says he didn't direct his comment at the peaceful January 6 protesters. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
The White House has confirmed that President Biden will deliver his first State of the Union address on March 1st. This will be the latest any president has delivered the address. It's usually made in January and occasionally in February. The delay is driven in part by a busy legislative calendar, the COVID spike we're dealing with, and the upcoming Winter Olympics, which broadcasts in February. Tradition holds that the House Speaker every year invites the president to the House chamber where he'll deliver the address. In her invitation to Biden, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi thanked the president, saying his patriotic leadership guided the U.S. out of the pandemic. 3 men who were convicted of murdering Ahmaud Arbery appeared in court today for sentencing. Arbery was murdered while running through a Georgia neighborhood in 2020. NTD's Jason Perry has a story.
Ahmaud Arbery was an avid jogger, but one day when he was running through a neighborhood in Georgia, Gregory and Travis McMichael, a father and son, grabbed their guns and got in a pickup truck to chase him. Travis McMichael later testified that he had a hunch Arbery was fleeing the scene of a crime. William Roddy Bryan joined the chase in his own pickup truck after the McMichaels passed his house. He used his cell phone to record Travis McMichael firing a shotgun at Arbery at close range. Bryan's video caused outrage when it emerged months later, and it became clear that none of the men involved had been arrested yet. A local prosecutor had concluded the killing was justified. All 3 men face a mandatory life sentence for felony murder in the state of Georgia. The only question before the judge was whether to allow any of the 3 men to have the possibility of parole after 30 years. Arbery's family members don't want any of them to be eligible for parole.
The loss of Ahmaud has devastated me and my family. So I'm asking that the man that killed him be given the maximum sentence available to the court. Thank you.
We'll never see Ahmaud again. So I feel they should stay behind them bars the rest of their life because they didn't give him a chance. Thank the court. Thank y'all for what y'all did. Our family stuck by. Thank the jury. I give all glory to God. Thank y'all.
The defense only sought parole for one of the 3 men, Roddy Bryan. Bryan's lawyer says Bryan is in a unique situation because he was found guilty of murder, although he didn't kill, intend to kill, or attempt to kill. After all the arguments and evidence were presented, the judge gave some words of wisdom before he delivered the sentences.
I also believe that in assuming the worst in others, we show our worst character. Assuming the best in others is always the best course of action. And maybe those are the grand lessons from this case.
The McMichaels were both sentenced to life in prison without parole, and Roddy Bryan was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Lawyers for all three men say they will appeal the convictions. All three men also face a federal trial in February on hate crime charges. They're accused of violating Arbery's civil rights for attacking him based on his race and color. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Parts of the eastern U.S. are white after a winter storm dumped more than half a foot of snow in the region today. Some schools and federal government offices are closed, and air traffic is facing even more problems on top of already existing staff shortages.
Winter storm warnings were in effect until midday for an area reaching from Washington north into Maine. The storm left some parts of Kentucky, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, and Maryland under 6 to 8 inches of snow. Coastal New England was hit hardest as some towns in Connecticut and Massachusetts saw more than a foot of snow. As of Friday morning, more than 400 flights were delayed or canceled at New York, Boston, and Washington airports. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy declared a state of emergency in his state and urged residents to stay off roads. The storm was the second this week to slam into the eastern United States. On Monday, the region was blanketed by up to a foot of snow, leaving a nearly 50-mile stretch of Interstate 95 in northern Virginia impassable. Behind the storm in the upper Midwest, temperatures dropped below zero overnight. Wind chills dropped as low as 25 below zero in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and the Dakotas early on Friday.
For New York City, today was this season's very first snow day. With that comes a lot of work for cleanup crews. NTD's Arian Pazdar has more from Times Square.
For the first time this winter, snow is lying over Times Square. Now it takes more than just cold weather for it to snow here. Earlier this week we had frozen rain, but today 2 storms collided, setting the stage for a white New York City.
It snowed throughout the night up until 8 a.m. this morning. Not only in Times Square, but also in other parts of the city and New Jersey. Cars and streets were covered in snow.
I don't know what to say.
People got creative when it came to freeing their cars from snow. One man used his boxing gloves to punch the snow off. Another woman used a sword to get the snow off her car. In Central Park, some brought out their cross-country skis. And as it so often happens when it snows in New York, the slush on the streets already started accumulating. And Times Square was of course filled with tourists. So what do they think about snow in New York?
Are you happy that it's snowing?
Yes, very happy because I come from a place from Greece where we don't have so many snow.
Well, I love it. It's romantic kind of, but a little bit nasty.
It's almost $90 million. So far, we haven't had a lot of snow. The money that's not being used will be allocated to next year's budget.
Even though every inch of snow costs the city millions of dollars, most people still enjoy a little snow during winter. Arian Pazdar, NTD News, New York.
Made in China products camouflaged in order to enter the U.S. military. That done by 2 American companies. NTD's Iris Tao brings us the details about the latest announcement by the Justice Department.
2 American companies now have to pay the government $900,000. This as a punishment for trying to trick the U.S. military about where their products were actually made. The Department of Justice on Thursday reveals that Sono International in Connecticut and Arc Capital Equipment in New York have agreed to pay the government for violating the False Claims Act. They supplied the Army and the Air Force with hundreds of shipping containers, allegedly hiding the fact that they were made in China or with Chinese steel. The DOJ's announcement comes as President Biden re-emphasizes supply chain security on the same day.
Let's make what we're selling in America made in America. So we're not at risk of foreign supply chains.
According to court documents obtained by NTD, Sono and Arc are accused of intentionally changing the identifying metal plates on 100 shipping containers made in China so that they appear to have been made in South Korea. The DoD's Buy American regulations require agencies to purchase American-made materials or ones made in specified allied countries, such as South Korea. U.S. Attorney Jennifer Williams says in the statement that Americans have the right to know that their tax dollars are being spent to support American jobs and American policies. She adds that those providing for our war fighters will be punished if they don't follow clear rules. The case surfaces amid ongoing tensions between China and the U.S. The White House has warned against threats posed by Chinese products in critical supply chains. Iris Tao, NTD News.
Security forces in Kazakhstan can now shoot to kill protesters. The country's president just authorized the measure today. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the United States is very concerned about the state of emergency in Kazakhstan. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
As the government of Kazakhstan attempts to end the civil unrest in the country, their president has labeled those involved in the protests as militants and terrorists. President Tokayev has now authorized security forces to shoot to kill those participating in the unrest. The protests began after gas prices were raised on New Year's Day. It's still unclear what led the initially peaceful protests to turn violent. Secretary of State Antony Blinken addressed the situation in the Central Asian country.
It would seem to me that the Kazakh authorities and government certainly have the capacity to deal appropriately with protests, to do so in a way that respects the rights of protesters while maintaining law and order. So it's not clear why they feel the need for any outside assistance, so we're trying to learn more about it.
President Tokayev asked Russia for military assistance, and Russian troops began arriving in Kazakhstan on Thursday. Kazakh officials have insisted that the Russian troops will not be fighting the demonstrators and instead will guard government institutions. But it isn't immediately clear whether the Russian troops have been involved in stopping the unrest.
We certainly call on those peacekeeping forces and law enforcement to adhere to international human rights standards to support a peaceful resolution. And again, we hope the government itself can quickly address the problems, which are fundamentally economic and political in nature. That's what these protests are all about.
Blinken went on to say the situation in Kazakhstan is different than the one in Ukraine, but he added,
having said that, I think one lesson of recent history is that once Russians are in your house, it's sometimes very difficult to get them to leave.
On Friday, Kazakhstan's Interior Ministry reported that security forces have killed 26 protesters. Another 26 were wounded, and more than 3,800 people have been detained. A total of 18 law enforcement officers were reported killed and over 700 injured, but the numbers could not be independently verified. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Up next, the first Black to win the Oscar for Best Actor has passed away. We'll take a look at his outstanding achievements. And the world's top-ranked tennis player is still stuck in Australia. His fellow players speak out, and the next Grand Slam event already announces he can attend. That and more here on NTD News. Today, a Bahamian official announced the death of Sidney Poitier. The actor, film director, and ambassador passed away at the age of 94. On Friday, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Bahamas announced that actor Sidney Poitier had passed away the previous evening. Details regarding his cause of death have not yet been released. Poitier was the first Black to win an Oscar for Best Actor for his role in Lilies of the Field. Poitier was born in Miami but grew up in the Bahamas. Despite early struggles with poverty and illiteracy, he rose to become one of the first Black actors to be known and accepted in major roles by mainstream audiences. In total, he acted in more than 50 films and directed 9. In 1974, Poitier was knighted by Britain's Queen Elizabeth II and served as the Bahamian ambassador to Japan and to UNESCO, the UN cultural agency. In 2009, then-President Barack Obama awarded Poitier the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor a U.S. president can bestow. Notable figures such as Oprah Winfrey and former President Obama paid tribute on Friday to the Bahamian American. A Colorado church suffered extensive smoke damage in the wildfire. The disaster caused both the pastor and the congregation to lose their homes, but they haven't lost their faith. Bill Stevens is a pastor of Ascent Community Church in Louisville. The devastating Colorado fire took his home and the homes of his congregation. He barely had time to grieve.
I'm trying my best to take care of the congregation. At the same time, we're dealing with the fact that our own house is gone.
The church itself survived the fire, but suffered extensive smoke damage. Volunteers spent a whole day removing holiday decorations. Most of them still reeked of smoke. For several weeks, church members won't be able to hold services here. But the pastor said the wildfire won't stop them from worshiping. They'll hold Sunday services at a local hotel until the church is ready to reopen. It's been a roller coaster of emotions for the community.
Moment, you'll be doing fine, and then you'll be driving down the road and you'll start crying.
He said at least 17 members of the church lost their homes.
So, and really it's the 17 people that have lost their home, but it's also all the people that have been displaced and the people that have a ton of smoke damage, the ones that are trying to figure out, did their pipes burst when they turned off the electricity? And it's just a community it's all been rocked by this. So.
At a disaster assistance center, Stevens picked up a $500 check from the Red Cross. Like other fire victims, he's now moving ahead toward recovery and rebuilding. The world's #1 tennis player, Novak Djokovic, is still being held in Australia, and his fellow players are speaking out. Meanwhile, organizers of the French Open say Djokovic will be able to attend. NTD's Dave Martin has more.
While Novak Djokovic is still being held up at his immigration detention hotel, he now has some company, at least temporarily, as Czech doubles player Renata Vorokova has become the second Australian Open participant to be detained. But unlike Djokovic, Vorokova has decided to drop out of the tournament and leave the country due to limited possibilities for training. Meanwhile, Australia's own outspoken tennis star Nick Kyrgios has spoken out, tweeting, "How we are handling Novak's situation is bad, really bad. This is one of our great champions, but at the end of the day, he is human. Do better." American tennis star John Isner, ranked 24th in the world, tweeted that what Novak is going through is not right. There's no justification for the treatment he's receiving. He followed the rules, was allowed to enter Australia, and now he's being detained against his own will. This is such a shame. The 2014 U.S. Open champion Marin Cilic said the whole thing was a bad look for the sport.
It's not a great picture for tennis.
Some good news for Djokovic, though. Organizers of the French Open, which starts in May, have said that the two-time winner can defend his title.
In France, at the moment, we do not have the same entry restrictions as Australia for athletes, as well as for any citizens of other countries.
Djokovic, for his part, released a statement thanking his fans for their support. Legal experts still don't like his chances, though. And with his case adjourned until Monday and Djokovic unable to practice until then, his prospects for winning have never been bleaker. Dave Martin, NTD News, New York.
Coming up, a couple in California drives into a restaurant manager after he confronts them over an unpaid bill in the parking lot. Also in California, a former San Francisco official pleaded guilty to a string of bribes and corruption during his time in office. His case is part of a larger investigation into the city's corruption.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell. Cancel culture has not only affected myself and MyPillow, but millions of you out there. Before all this started, I had already written in my memoir, I dedicate this book to anyone that's looking for hope. Well, right now, we're all looking for hope. I believe that my story is going to bring inspiration and hope to everyone. By the time you're done reading my book, you will believe that with God, all things are possible. To thank you all for your support, I'm offering some of my best prices ever on MyPillow products, including this exclusive bundle. You get my book and these 5 MyPillows. They all have beautiful scenes and verses from the Bible, such as Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, for I am with you. This 6-pack bundle is regularly $219. Now it's just $99.98 and free shipping with your promo code. Go to mypillow.com and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below. Thank you and God bless.
Oh, hey, doesn't it feel like there's communists everywhere? In fact, the Chinese Communist Party has been subverting America from every angle. So whether it's compromising our politicians, controlling Hollywood, manipulating Wall Street, or infiltrating our schools, they have stopped at nothing to take down America. And I believe that in order for us to not become like China, we need citizens who know the truth. So go on over to getepic.com, stay informed with a subscription to the Epic Times, and you will get instant access to this infographic.
At The Nation Speaks, we don't just scratch the surface. We want to go wide and deep. Our viewers come away with a much richer understanding of the issues of the day. We really make a big effort to bring on different voices onto the show. We don't just talk to experts and newsmakers, which of course are extremely important, but we also want to hear from the American people. So the people who are impacted by the policies and issues that we're talking about, because what they have to say is just as important to the national conversation.
A California duo was caught on video surveillance allegedly skipping out on their restaurant bill and trying to leave in their car. When the manager confronts them in the parking lot, they proceed to run into him while fleeing the scene. NTD's Jason Blair has the details.
Video surveillance catches the moment when an alleged dine and dash turns into a hit and run. According to KTLA, the manager of the Raging Cajun Cafe in Redondo Beach, California, noticed a couple left their unpaid check at the table and were about to drive away. He walked into the parking lot, standing in front of their car asking them to pay their bill. After a brief interaction, the driver abruptly drove the car into the manager. He was carried on the hood of the vehicle before falling off onto the sidewalk when the car turned out of the parking lot. Lisa Britton Hodges, one of the cafe's owners, told KTLA that the couple asked to sit outdoors at one of the furthest tables. She noticed they were ordering some of the more expensive items on the menu and quickly accumulated a $90 bill. About 40 minutes later, they asked for the bill and some to-go boxes. That's when the manager noticed they had left without paying. Redondo Beach police are currently investigating the incident and are taking tips and leads. Jason Blair, NTD News, California.
A former San Francisco official pleaded guilty in a federal court on Thursday. The charges include a string of bribery and corruption. During his years in office, NTD's Eileen Ang brings us more.
Former San Francisco Public Works Director Mohamed Nuru officially pleaded guilty to honest services wire fraud. The 59-year-old is charged for a long-running scheme involving multiple bribes and kickbacks during his time in office from 2011 to 2020. Nuru admitted to receiving bribes like free travel, gifts, and benefits from Walter Wong, who owns a construction company. He also admitted to getting free meals and entertainment from Nick Bovis, a restaurant owner, and to money laundering with Sandra Zuniga, his girlfriend at one point. Nuru also accepted numerous valuable items and benefits from Recology, a waste management company. The company hired Nuru's son at his request. In return, he used his official position to help Recology's business. Nuru agreed to plead guilty on December 17th and was scheduled to enter a formal plea on January 14th. Meanwhile, he remains out of custody on bond. In a statement, the acting U.S. attorney said Nuru admits to a staggering amount of public corruption in his plea argument. He took continuous bribes from the contractors, developers, and entities he regulated. He now faces a prison sentence for enriching himself at the expense of the public as he sat in high office. He has a sentencing hearing scheduled for May. His case is part of a larger federal investigation targeting public corruption in San Francisco. So far, 12 individuals and 3 corporate entities have been charged. The case includes another high-ranking San Francisco public official, Harlan Kelly, the former general manager of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. In October, he and a real estate investor were charged with bank fraud and conspiracy to commit bank fraud. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
An Amazon subsidiary purchased 7 acres of land in Northern California. The payment was made all in cash. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Amazon Data Services, a subsidiary of Amazon, paid $51.8 million in cash for land in Santa Clara, the Mercury News reported, citing the Santa Clara County Recorder's Office. According to real estate documents filed on January 4th, it listed the price and payment. IPI Partners, the seller, reportedly bought the land for $47.1 million in 2021. The land is also adjacent to another property that IPI owns. NTD reached out to Amazon for comment but didn't hear back. Amazon has been purchasing land in recent years. Back in December, the company bought 60 acres of land near shopping centers in Gilroy. The Seattle-based company paid about $31 million. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Coming up, officials in China's Xi'an announced the city had reached, quote, basically zero COVID-19 cases. But citizens say that claim shouldn't be taken at face value. And a mother in France won the first battle in her lawsuit against a French drug maker. At issue is a drug that can cause birth defects and learning difficulties when taken during pregnancy. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News. How can a city achieve zero cases of COVID-19? Chinese citizens summarize the Chinese Communist Party's creative solutions to the problem. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has a story.
After 2 weeks of strict lockdowns, Xi'an announced on Wednesday that community virus cases in the city had reached basically zero and that the outbreak had been effectively controlled. This means that all new cases were detected in individuals undergoing quarantine and in areas under lockdown. Authorities say this is a big success, but not everyone seems to agree. A retired college instructor in China tells NTD that the harm done by the zero cases policy is greater than the harm done by the outbreak itself. She also says that the zero cases policy is a political task and that CCP officials are falsifying figures to make political requirements. To protect her identity, we only use her last name.
They are just trying to complete political tasks. The reports on zero cases are all fake. This is because it has something to do with each individual's position. If the pandemic spreads, the official will be dismissed. So he covers it up and doesn't report it, or he reports less than it really is. If he reports the true situation, they will punish him. They are not there to solve the problem.
Leo says this is a very common phenomenon in communist countries. Some netizens are pointing out that a week ago, the CCP secretary of the province set a goal of achieving zero cases by January 4th. And then on January 5th, authorities announced that the city had reached the goal. One netizen commented, the virus is really loyal to the party. The party says that it will not spread, then it stops spreading. They should recruit comrade virus into the party. The joke has gone viral on social media. It makes fun of the terms basically zero and dynamically zero. The joke goes like this. Basically zero means you throw the garbage from your house to your neighbor's house, and there will be basically zero garbage in your house. And dynamically zero means the next day the neighbor throws all the garbage back to your house, and the day after you throw all the garbage back to your neighbor's house once again. Then both you and your neighbor will have dynamically zero garbage. This joke refers to how authorities are moving a lot of people to other places for quarantine.
Beijing is pushing forward its zero COVID goal, no matter the cost. But now, amid one of the country's strictest lockdowns to date, people in Xi'an City are realizing that they are actually the cost the regime's propaganda is referring to. Here's what some of them had to say.
Central China's Xi'an City is now all but paralyzed by the communist regime's pandemic control orders. NTD interviewed some residents there to find out more about the situation. One of them, Mr. Zhao, gave his take on what's happening.
The lockdown has been going on for over 10 days. We are not allowed to go out nor to go downstairs. Close your eyes and imagine a city of over 10 million people, but you can barely see any people or cars on the street. Only staff and vehicles are patrolling around. All households have their doors shut. Shops are closed. Imagine that. It's not even like this in wartime.
Another resident shared a video focused on how many in the city are stuck with nowhere to go. Others comment on social media about more difficulties. And hashtags like nowhere to buy vegetables, starved to death, and nothing left have started popping up on trending topics lists. In another clip, a man is seen visibly upset, describing being hungry. Since residents are banned from leaving home, officials have pledged to deliver groceries door to door. But reports have come in saying the deliveries are small and infrequent. On the other hand, food supplies rarely seem to run short for Communist Party officials and those tied to them. One such woman was seen showing off a delivery of free food, including various vegetables, meat, fish, and eggs. On the healthcare front, the situation is also reportedly worsening. Medical care has become limited amid strict hospital policies driven by Xi'an's lockdown. Resident Mr. Lin has high blood pressure and relies on daily medication. He told NTD that now it's hard to get that medication refilled because the pandemic control staff won't let him go out to get it.
I argued with them for over 40 minutes. They finally let me go outside the community, but there's no bus to take. I'm nearly 80 with high blood pressure. I finally walked to the hospital and my blood pressure rose over 160, showing symptoms of a stroke. I suffer a lot.
Another Xi'an resident reportedly suffered a sudden heart attack. He later lost his life amid delays in hospital care. Reports say he called emergency services multiple times when his symptoms first surfaced, but he wasn't able to reach help. By the time his call went through, emergency personnel refused to take him to the hospital because he didn't have an up-to-date negative virus test result. He went on to get rejected by 3 total hospitals until he lost his life in bed at the 4th hospital.
As the Omicron variant continues to spread across the UK, pressure is mounting on the country's health service. Staff shortages, largely due to self-isolation, are prompting the Ministry of Defense to deploy troops in London. Around 200 armed forces personnel are being made available to hospitals across the capital. Here's NTD's Trevor Piper with this report.
The health sector is seeing growing staff shortages, mostly due to self-isolation. In response, the Ministry of Defense is making 200 military personnel available to hospitals in the capital.
This is a time of year that is busy even if there weren't COVID-19. And so put a surge of COVID-19 on top of winter pressures, and you have an extraordinary situation that has put the NHS on a war footing.
The deployment includes 40 military medics and 160 general duty personnel. It's expected they will be on task for the next 3 weeks. Around 1,800 service personnel are already deployed across the UK to support the civil authorities in their response to the pandemic. Health Secretary Sajid David says England's NHS faces pressure in coming weeks as more older people are catching COVID and hospitalisations are rising. This comes after the Prime Minister said this week that ministers hope to ride out the latest wave without the need for further restrictions in England. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
A British government report says scientific evidence on the impact of using face masks in school is not conclusive. This is just a few days after it recommended that secondary school students should wear masks in classrooms. The report also mentions the impacts of face masks on children's well-being. Over half of the students surveyed said masks made learning more difficult. NTD's Joanne Robson has more on this.
According to evidence published by the Department for Education on Wednesday, studies have provided mixed results on the effectiveness of face masks in schools. One of the studies found that in secondary schools that used face masks, the average COVID-19 absence rate fell from 5.3% on October the 1st to 3% by the 3rd week of the month. In secondary schools that did not use face masks, the average COVID-19 absence rate fell from 5.3% to 3.6%. The Department for Education recommended that secondary schools should wear masks in classrooms when they returned after the Christmas break. The study result was quoted by the Education Secretary to show the effectiveness of face coverings.
My department has also looked at some observational data from a sample of 123 schools where face coverings had been in use in the autumn term and found that there was a greater reduction in COVID absence compared to those where students didn't wear face coverings.
But the Department for Education's evidence review made it clear that there is a level of statistical uncertainty around the result, and the greater reduction in absences could be down to chance. The review also says the study is non-peer reviewed. The Education Secretary acknowledged the impact on children's well-being.
I have commissioned staff from my department to conduct further research to better understand the negative impacts of face coverings on education, along with publishing the initial findings on this today. But I have to strike a balance, Madam Deputy Speaker, between the vital need to keep schools open and reducing the spread of infection.
A Department for Education survey in March last year found that 70% of pupils said face masks made them feel safe. But 80% said wearing them made it difficult to communicate, and 55% said they made learning more difficult. But Susan Hopkins, Chief Medical Advisor to the UK Health Security Agency, said, "We support the Department for Education's decision to reintroduce the use of face masks in secondary schools temporarily, while COVID rates remain high." The study was carried out last term, so it does not include any data on Omicron. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
In France, a mother who's been fighting for a decade to sue a French drug maker over an epilepsy drug has won her first battle on Wednesday. The drug can cause birth defects and learning difficulties when taken during pregnancy. NTD's Eddie Atkin has that report.
Maureen Martin, the mother of 2 children born with birth defects, has won her first battle against French drug maker Sanofi in court on Wednesday. Martin, who was diagnosed with epilepsy at age 6, has taken the epilepsy drug Depakine all her life, including during her 2 pregnancies. Her doctors assured her there was not risks based on Sanofi data. Her son, now 19, and daughter, now 22, were both born with birth defects. What ensued was a decade-long court battle. The association Martin heads, APESAC, represents 7,500 families and launched a class action in September 2021 against Sanofi. Sanofi was placed under formal investigation in 2020 on charges of manslaughter over Depakine. French health authorities have estimated Depakine was responsible for deformities in between 2,000 and 4,000 children, as well as the neurodevelopmental defects in up to around 30,000 children. APESAC has said families should obtain hundreds of millions of pounds in compensation.
I hope that Depakine victims will realise that it is possible to win and that they shouldn't lose hope. Of course, it is long. They, Sanofi, are tough adversaries. Sanofi is the 4th biggest pharmaceutical company in the world. They're a leading French pharmaceutical company. They will obviously fight this, but that doesn't mean you can't win. David wins against Goliath in the end, so you have to believe in it.
Sanofi denied those charges at the time and said it would challenge the merits of the investigation. It said on Wednesday the decision of the court, the Tribunal Judiciaire de Paris, contradicted previous ones in this case. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Just ahead, color-changing cars are becoming a reality. BMW is unveiling the world's first color-changing vehicle, complete with a technology called e-ink. All that and more in just a moment.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason. The financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new precious metals IRA. Call now.
Sculptors from all around Russia are spending several days in sub-zero temperatures, creating giant ice statues for this year's Siberia Snow Sculpture Festival. Some traveled thousands of miles to take part. This story comes from NTD's Neil Woodrow.
27 participants, including 12 schoolchildren, are chipping, slicing and moulding huge blocks of snow to create ice sculptures for the annual competition in Novosibirsk that will be judged this weekend. This competitor is from Kazakhstan, 1,000 miles away.
Such a competition is traditionally held in Novosibirsk, giving the artist an opportunity to work creatively with the snowy material. Not every place, not every city provides such an opportunity. Therefore, for us to visit Novosibirsk, to take part, is always a holiday.
Each team of 2 or 3 participants gets 4 cubic meters of snow to work with. Shovels, saws and knives are used in the process, but often the sculptors use self-made tools.
For the most part, probably, snow artists use homemade tools. For example, this is a grinding tool, or you can call it a grater. It is used to smooth snow in some places. Treat the snow surface in this way, level it. It is essentially the same as woodwork.
The artists are invited to reflect the beauty and basic values of the different nations of Siberia. People from more than 130 nationalities live in the Novosibirsk region. The themes used by the sculptors are based on their legends, myths and beliefs. This team's creation represents a fire awakening the Siberian animal spirit.
We have a huge owl at the very top, which spreads its wings out of the smoke, these ashes, and protects the Siberian land.
This participant from the Republic of Tuva says his piece is called From General to Generation and is dedicated to the heritage of stonecutters of Siberia that older generations are passing down to younger sculptors.
These animals are here since in Siberia the most sacred wild animals are the snow leopard and the mountain goat. They are almost divine, and behind them are our highest mountains, the Sayan Mountains, which are also in our Republic of Tuva.
He says at minus 12 degrees Celsius it is unseasonably warm for this time of year, which loosens the snow, but he expects colder weather on Saturday, enabling him to finish the sculpture. A jury made up of architecture and design professionals will award the 3 winning teams each with a cup. The sculptures will remain on display until the end of the month. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
Have you ever imagined cars that can change colors? It's now a reality. BMW has just unveiled the world's first color-changing car at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Let's take a look.
The concept car, called the BMW iX Flow, uses e-ink technology to produce fluid color changes. When stimulated by electrical signals, the e-ink technology brings different color pigments to the surface of the car.
It's the material we know from e-readers, so from Kindles. So it's the reason why you can read your Kindles so nicely in the sun, because there's actual color change going on there. So we took this material, it's kind of a thick paper, and our challenge was to get this on a 3D object like our cars.
The driver would have the option of changing the color from within the cabin, or by using an app, or even through hand gestures.
Okay, so now I'm switching it with the app to various effects. So now it's white. We switch it to a darker color, and now back to white, and we put it into bi-color mode. So the top's lighter and the bottom is darker.
Drivers would also be able to choose different colors to influence sunlight reflections.
On a hot sunny day like today, you could switch the color white to reflect sunlight. On a cold day, you could switch it black to absorb the heat, support climate control, and support sustainability. And the awesome thing about this technology, it's bistable. So if you switch it white, take the power off, it stays white. So it doesn't need any energy to hold any given color.
It's not yet clear if it's legal to change the color of a registered vehicle. BMW says the legality of it will have to be discussed. The technology is still in its early days. The current model displayed at CES can only turn gray and white, but BMW plans to cover a wide color spectrum.
Oregon State University today demolished the west side of its Reser Stadium as part of a $153 million renovation project. A crowd gathered to watch the early morning implosion, which was also live-streamed from multiple angles. The massive structure crumbled within seconds, sending plumes of smoke into the air. The renovated stadium is scheduled to be opened before the 2023 football season. It'll include a new welcome center for prospective students, along with a wellness clinic for OSU students, employees, and the community. Zookeepers in Miami are celebrating the new year with another new addition. Bald eagles Ron and Rita hatched their third chick on Thursday. Let's take a look. The first one came on New Year's Day. Ron and Rita have spent months nesting their eggs. Local conservation and rescue organizations teamed up to build an artificial platform for them. The original one was destroyed during a storm. Raising 3 eaglets is rare because they're often aggressive toward one another. The youngest is already at a disadvantage because it's significantly smaller and weaker than its siblings. But the zoo says it won't interfere and will let nature take its course. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. Stefania will be back on Monday.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.